Number 1. The Roanoke Colony. In 1590, an English supply ship arrived at Roanoke Island, a settlement off the coast of what is now North Carolina, to find the colony abandoned. 115 men, women, and children had been living there. They were gone. The only trace was a single word carved into a wooden post: Croatoan. The Roanoke Colony was established under the direction of Sir Walter Raleigh as part of England's early attempts to create a permanent settlement in North America. The first group of colonists arrived in 1585 and returned to England within a year due to conflict with local indigenous populations and supply shortages. A second group arrived in 1587. This group included 117 people, men, women, and children, under the governorship of John White. Shortly after arrival, White's daughter gave birth to a daughter named Virginia Dare, the first English child born in the Americas.
Within a few weeks, White was persuaded to return to England to request additional supplies. He left the colony on August 27, 1587. He did not return for 3 years. His delay was caused by England's war with Spain, specifically the Spanish Armada crisis of 1588, which resulted in a government order prohibiting ships from leaving England. By the time White was finally able to return, in 1590, 3 years had passed. What he found on Roanoke Island was an empty settlement. Buildings had been dismantled, in an orderly manner, suggesting a planned departure rather than a sudden flight. The word Croatoan was carved into a post. The letters C-R-O were carved into a nearby tree. White had agreed with the colonists before leaving that if they departed voluntarily, they would carve their destination. If they left under distress, they would carve a cross above the name. There was no cross.
Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, now called Hatteras Island, and also the name of a local indigenous people who inhabited it. White interpreted the carving as a message. The colonists had moved to Croatoan. However, White was unable to search the island before a storm forced his ship to leave. He never returned to North America. The colony was never found. Subsequent expeditions in the early 1600s asked local indigenous people about the colonists. Accounts from early Jamestown settlers who arrived in 1607 suggested that some people with European features and behaviors may have been living among indigenous communities further inland. Captain John Smith reportedly heard reports of survivors. Explorers were instructed to search for them. The searches produced conflicting accounts and no confirmed contact.
The most widely accepted theory among historians today is that the colonists integrated voluntarily with local indigenous communities, either on Croatoan/Hatteras Island or further inland with the Chesapeake or Lumbee peoples. This would be consistent with the orderly dismantling of the settlement, the absence of a distress cross, and the later accounts of indigenous communities with apparent European characteristics. Archaeological work continues on Hatteras Island and in the surrounding region. Investigations have found European-era artifacts in indigenous settlement layers, though what these artifacts conclusively prove about the Roanoke colonists specifically is still debated. Other theories have included conflict and massacre by hostile indigenous groups, starvation, an attempt to sail back to England on the colony's remaining small boats, and, in more speculative accounts, involvement of forces or phenomena that have never been identified.
There is no physical evidence currently in the public record that confirms any of these explanations definitively. Archaeological teams, including researchers from the First Colony Foundation, have conducted extensive surveys of the region. In 2012, an analysis of a map from the period suggested that a fort symbol had been painted over, possibly indicating a planned inland settlement location. Excavations at the site of that symbol have recovered artifacts consistent with the late 16th century. The scholarly consensus leans toward integration with indigenous communities as the most plausible outcome. Survival, adaptation, and assimilation, not dramatic catastrophe. But most plausible is not the same as confirmed. No skeleton has been identified as belonging to a Roanoke colonist. No document in the English record describes a reunion or confirmed contact. The Roanoke story endures not only because it is unresolved, but because of what it represents.
These were the first English people to attempt permanent life in North America. Among them was the first English child born there. And then they vanished into a continent that England barely understood, never to reappear in any documented form. The carving Croatoan is still the only direct message the colony ever sent back. Everything else is inference, archaeology, and accounts gathered from people who heard something from someone else. 115 people, including infants, left a message carved in wood and walked into a landscape that swallowed them completely. Where did they go? The most likely answer is they walked to the Croatoan people and they lived. They had children. They became part of a community that was never recorded in English documents. But if that is the answer, where are the records? Where are the artifacts? Where are the bones? Croatoan was the last word they left, and the forest kept everything else. Number 2, the wow
Signal. On August 15, 1977, at 11:16 p.m. Eastern Time, a radio telescope at The Ohio State University detected something unusual. It lasted for exactly 72 seconds, the full window the telescope could observe any given point in the sky as the Earth rotated. The astronomer who found it in the data printout circled it in red pen and wrote a single word in the margin. Wow. The signal has never been detected again. The Big Ear radio telescope was operated by Ohio State University as part of SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It operated continuously, scanning the sky and printing data on long sheets of computer paper. On September 18, 1977, astronomer Jerry Eman was reviewing the data from the night of August 15th. He noticed a sequence of characters that was dramatically different from the background noise. 6EQUJ5. In the notation system used by the telescope, letters represented signal strengths above a certain threshold. Higher letters meant stronger signals.
A number like 6 represented modest signal strength. U represented exceptional strength. The sequence 6EQUJ5 indicated a signal that peaked at U, nearly 30 times the background noise, and then faded symmetrically. The shape of the signal's rise and fall was consistent with what a narrowband radio transmission from a fixed point in space would look like, as the rotating Earth carried the telescope past it. The signal appeared to originate from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It was detected near the frequency of 1,420 megahertz, the frequency at which hydrogen atoms naturally emit radiation, and a frequency that SETI researchers had long theorized might be used by a technologically advanced civilization as a kind of universal broadcast frequency, precisely because any civilization that understands hydrogen would know it. Attempts to redetect the signal began immediately.
Eamon and other researchers pointed every available instrument at the same region of sky.
The signal was not found again. What makes the WOW signal unusual is not merely its strength. It is the combination of characteristics it displayed. It was narrow band, compressed into a very small range of frequencies. Natural cosmic phenomena tend to emit broad-spectrum radiation. Narrowband signals are, by and large, produced by technology. It came from the direction of open space, not from a known object such as a star, planet, or galaxy that would produce radio noise by other mechanisms. It matched the theoretical profile of what a signal transmitted from deep space by a powerful artificial source might look like. And it appeared once, in perfect form, and was never seen again. In 2016, a team of astronomers proposed an alternative explanation. The signal may have been produced by hydrogen clouds associated with a comet passing through the field of view. The team identified two comets, 266P/Christensen and P/2008Y2, Gibbs, that were in the approximate region at the time.
Eamon himself reviewed this hypothesis and expressed skepticism. Critics noted that the telescope's methodology should have detected other signals from the same comets, and that hydrogen emission from a comet would typically be broader spectrum than what was recorded. The comet hypothesis is not universally accepted. It has not been disproven. The simplest extraordinary explanation is that the WOW signal was a transmission from a technologically advanced civilization located somewhere in the direction of Sagittarius. SETI researchers have been careful not to make this claim definitively because a single detection, never repeated, cannot be confirmed as a true signal rather than a transient or instrumental artifact. But the characteristics of the signal are consistent with what is theoretically expected from an intentional narrowband transmission at the hydrogen line frequency.
Some researchers have proposed that the signal may be from a civilization that does not transmit continuously, perhaps a directed beam that sweeps across space, and the Earth happened to fall within that beam for 72 seconds in August 1977 and has not aligned with it since. Others have suggested that the signal may repeat on a very long cycle, perhaps decades, and has simply not been detected again because detection requires the right instrument pointed at the right place at the right moment. There is no confirmed explanation. In 2012, astronomers Robert Gray and Kevin Marvel conducted the most extensive follow-up search to date, using the Very Large Array Radio Telescope to observe the WOW signal region for approximately 2 hours. No signal was detected. In 2020, a team at the Center for Planetary Science detected a phenomenon associated with cometary hydrogen emission that was consistent with some features of the original signal, forming the basis of the 2016 comet hypothesis.
The scientific community has not reached consensus. The WOW signal remains, in the formal language of SETI research, unexplained. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence rests on a statistical argument. The universe is so vast, containing so many stars and so many potentially habitable planets, that the existence of other intelligent life is considered by many scientists to be probable. If that is true, if intelligence exists elsewhere, then at some point, those civilizations may produce detectable signals. The WOW signal appeared, very briefly, to be exactly that. Whether it was or wasn't, the event did something that the years of background noise in SETI data had never done. It produced a data point that required an explanation. The comet hypothesis may be that explanation. The search continues regardless, because if the signal was real, and if it repeats, the next detection would be the most significant event in the history of human civilization.
On August 15, 1977, a radio telescope detected something for 72 seconds. A man circled it in red pen. He wrote one word, and then it was gone. Was it a comet? Was it interference? Was it something that has never been identified? Or was it, for 72 seconds, the sound of something else existing in the universe? Looking outward,
not knowing anyone was listening? The answer depends on where you believe we are in the cosmos, and whether you believe we are alone. Number 3. Amelia Earhart. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Lae, New Guinea, on the most difficult leg of their attempt to circumnavigate the globe along the equator. Their destination was Howland Island, a tiny, low-lying coral island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, approximately 2,500 miles away. They never arrived. Their last confirmed radio transmission gave no indication of catastrophe. There was no distress call. No wreckage was found.
Earhart was the most famous female aviator in the world. The search launched to find her was one of the largest and most expensive in U.S. naval history. She has never been found. Amelia Earhart had already established multiple aviation records by 1937. Her around-the-world attempt along the equatorial route, the longest possible path, was her most ambitious undertaking. She and Fred Noonan departed from Lae, New Guinea, on the morning of July 2nd. The weather was partly cloudy. The leg to Howland Island was the most challenging of the entire journey. A tiny target in a vast ocean, requiring precise navigation. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed near Howland Island, assigned to make radio contact with Earhart and guide her in with a radio signal. What the transcripts of those radio communications show is a pattern of increasing difficulty. Earhart's transmissions were received intermittently. She reported not receiving the Itasca's transmissions.
She gave her position in general terms, stating she was flying on the line 157337, a navigational bearing, but could not locate the island. Her final transmission, received at 8:43 a.m. local time, reported fuel running low and that she was unable to reach the Itasca. After that, silence. A search involving 9 ships and 66 aircraft, the largest air and sea search in United States history up to that point, found nothing. The radio communications have been analyzed extensively. Several researchers have noted that there were technical issues on both sides. The Itasca was transmitting on frequencies that may not have matched what Earhart was monitoring, and the nature of the radio equipment of the era made two-way communication unreliable over long distances. In the days following the disappearance, the U.S. Navy received radio signals that some operators believed were from Earhart.
Civilian radio operators also reported receiving signals they believed to be distress calls on the frequency Earhart had been using. None of these signals was conclusively authenticated. Some were analyzed and found to be credible. Others were attributed to interference. The Navy ultimately dismissed them. Since the 1980s, a research organization called TIGHAR, the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, has conducted expeditions to Nikomaroro Island, approximately 400 miles southeast of Howland. The theory: Earhart and Noonan, unable to find Howland, followed their navigational bearing and landed on Nikomaroro's reef, where they survived for some period as castaways. Archaeological evidence recovered from Nikomaroro has been cited in support of this theory. Artifacts consistent with 1930s American origin, a partial human skeleton discovered in 1940, since lost, and other circumstantial material.
In 2023, a search using advanced underwater sonar technology identified a sonar anomaly at depth near Nikumaroro, consistent in size and shape with a Lockheed Electra, the type of aircraft Earhart was flying. Subsequent analysis has neither confirmed nor ruled out this finding. There are three main theories, each with organized research groups investigating them. The first, and most widely accepted by aviation historians, is that Earhart and Noonan ran out of fuel, ditched in the ocean near their calculated position, and sank. The Pacific is deep. If the aircraft went down in open water, it may never be found. The second, associated with TIGHAR, proposes the Nikumaroro castaway theory described above. If correct, it would mean Earhart and Noonan survived the landing but were never rescued, dying on the island before the initial search extended to that area.
The third, the least supported by documentary evidence, is that Earhart was on a covert intelligence mission for the US government, was captured by Japanese forces, and died in captivity. This theory appeared in various forms during World War II and has persisted. A photograph discovered in 2017, initially thought to show Earhart and Noonan in Japanese custody, was subsequently identified by researchers as predating the 1937 disappearance. The fuel exhaustion and ocean ditching theory is the one most consistent with the confirmed facts. The radio communications showed navigational difficulty. The fuel load for the leg was calculated to be tight, and no runway or reef capable of supporting a landing was confirmed in the area of her last known position. The Nikumaroro theory adds archaeological and forensic circumstantial support, but lacks a confirmed aircraft identification or confirmed skeletal identification. The 2023 sonar anomaly remains under analysis.
Confirmation would require closer inspection, which has not yet been conducted as of the available record. Amelia Earhart was not simply a famous person. She was a symbol of aviation, of women's capability, of the modern age pushing against its own limits. The incompleteness of the record, no wreckage confirmed, no remains confirmed, no distress signal that was conclusively authenticated, left a space that theories naturally filled. And unlike many mysteries, this one has active research with real scientific tools. The ocean floor has not yet answered the question, but it is being asked with increasing precision, year after year. On July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart flew her aircraft into the Pacific and did not come out. The ocean is 4 miles deep in places near the search area. Did she ditch and sink? Did she land on a reef and wait for rescue that never came? Or is there a different answer in waters still unsearched? The sonar anomaly near Nikumaroro is still being evaluated.
The Pacific has not returned the aircraft. What really happened to Amelia Earhart? The answer is somewhere at the bottom of the world, or on the shore of a tiny island, or in a part of the ocean no one has looked yet. It has not been found. Number 4. The Tunguska Event. On June 30th, 1908, at approximately 7:14 in the morning, something exploded over the remote Siberian wilderness near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River. The explosion was estimated to be 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. It flattened trees over an area of roughly 2,000 square kilometers, an area larger than the city of London. It registered on seismographs across Europe. It produced atmospheric pressure waves that circled the Earth twice. There was no crater. There were no confirmed fragments of a solid extraterrestrial object at the epicenter. And for nearly 20 years, no scientific expedition reached the site.
The Tunguska Event occurred in Siberia, in what is now Russia, in one of the most sparsely populated regions on Earth. The nearest settlement of any size was hundreds of miles away. Witnesses in outlying areas described seeing a column of blue light, as bright as the sun, moving across the sky. They described a flash, then a shockwave that knocked people off their feet, shattered windows, and toppled structures at distances of 40 to 60 kilometers from the epicenter. One witness, a trader named Semenov, was reportedly thrown from his porch and rendered briefly unconscious. He later described the heat as intense enough to feel as though his clothing was burning. Seismic stations in Europe detected the shockwave. A pressure wave registered at weather stations across the continent. In the nights following the event, unusual atmospheric luminescence was reported across Europe and Western Russia, skies that were bright enough to read by at midnight.
The first scientific expedition to reach the site was led by Leonid Kulik in 1927, nearly 20 years later. What Kulik found was a zone of devastation covering approximately 2,000 square kilometers. Trees knocked flat in a radial pattern emanating from a central point, with the trees at the very center standing upright but stripped of all branches. A signature pattern consistent with an aerial explosion directly overhead. There was no impact crater. The absence of a crater and the absence of recovered solid fragments from the object is the central physical puzzle of the Tunguska Event. An explosion of this magnitude, if caused by a solid meteorite striking the Earth's surface, should have produced a crater. The pattern of devastation, however, is consistent with what is called an airburst, a situation in which an extraterrestrial object explodes in the atmosphere before reaching the ground, releasing its energy above the surface.
Early searches for fragments recovered some material, microscopic spherules consistent with meteoric composition embedded in peat layers. Later analyses found higher than background concentrations of iridium, an element associated with extraterrestrial objects in the soil. However, no large fragments were ever definitively recovered. The butterfly pattern of the fallen trees, flat across a wide area, standing at the center, is consistent with airburst models. Computer simulations conducted since the 1990s have generally supported the conclusion that an object of 50 to 80 meters in diameter entered the atmosphere at a steep angle and exploded at an altitude of roughly 5 to 10 kilometers. One additional anomaly. Early soil studies conducted in the 1950s and 1960s reported possible anomalies in the peat that some researchers interpreted as evidence of unusual biological or chemical activity following the event. These findings were not consistently replicated.
The mainstream scientific explanation is a small asteroid or comet fragment that exploded in the atmosphere before reaching the ground, what scientists now call a superbolide or large airburst event. Some researchers have favored the comet hypothesis, arguing that a comet's icy composition would explain the absence of recoverable solid fragments. The object would have vaporized almost entirely. Others favor a stony asteroid, noting that some fragmentary material has been recovered. In 2013, an unrelated airburst event over Chelyabinsk, Russia, provided a modern case study. The Chelyabinsk event released energy roughly 30 times smaller than Tunguska, and still damaged thousands of buildings and injured more than 1,000 people. Fragments of the Chelyabinsk meteorite were recovered. Fragments of Tunguska, at 1,000 times the energy, have not been conclusively found, a fact that continues to generate debate. There have been more unconventional theories.
In the 1940s and 1950s, during the early nuclear era, some Soviet researchers speculated about whether the event could have involved an unusual natural phenomenon, a black hole passing through the Earth, for instance. This hypothesis has no scientific support. There are also theories connecting the Tunguska event to the experimental work of Nikola Tesla, who was conducting high-power radio frequency experiments in approximately the same period. Some proponents have suggested that Tesla's transmitter at Wardenclyffe could have directed energy toward the region. There is no documentary or physical evidence connecting Tesla's experiments to the Tunguska explosion.
Tesla never claimed such a connection. The scientific consensus is a natural airburst event caused by a small asteroid or comet fragment exploding at altitude, releasing energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT and producing no recoverable crater because the object was fully consumed in the explosion.
This explanation is consistent with the observed physical evidence, the radial tree fall, the standing but stripped trees at the epicenter, the seismic and atmospheric records, the recovered microscopic fragments, and the absence of a ground-level crater. In 2013, a team of researchers reported finding fragments of a stony asteroid embedded in a lake near the epicenter, Lake Checo. This finding was presented as potential Tunguska material, though subsequent analysis raised questions about the age of the lake's sediment layers, and the team's conclusions were not universally accepted. The scientific investigation continues, more than 115 years after the event. The Tunguska Event is one of the very few mysteries in this collection that most scientists consider essentially solved, yet it persists as a subject of alternative theories. Part of the reason is the remoteness and delayed investigation. 20 years of uncontaminated speculation preceded the first scientific expedition.
By the time Kulik arrived, the stories had already accumulated, and the site's isolation meant that early data collection was incomplete. Part of the reason is the sheer scale. An event of that magnitude, leaving no recoverable primary object, feels incomplete to the human desire for physical evidence. And part of it is the timing. 1908 was a decade defined by rapid technological change, including early wireless transmission. The idea that an explosion of that power could be natural rather than the product of some unknown technology was, for some observers, harder to accept than alternatives. Something exploded over Siberia on June 30th, 1908, with the force of 1,000 Hiroshimas. The trees still show the pattern. The ground still holds microscopic traces of the event. The lake sediment may contain fragments. Most of what arrived in the atmosphere that morning is gone, converted to energy in a fraction of a second, 5 to 10 kilometers above the forest. Was it a rock? Was it ice?
Was it something else? The leading scientific answer is a rock. But a rock of that size, travelling at that speed, at that angle, and leaving so little of itself behind, still produces a silence at the centre of the data. The forest grew back. The trees are standing again a century later. Whatever came down that morning, the Siberian wilderness absorbed it completely and gave almost nothing back.